So this is the work done through the NSF fund with Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. So basically what we're trying to do is let's look at how children, they're reacting. So as a pedestrian, as we know, like the fatality of the crashes of all is decreasing, but when you look at the pedestrian, we do have some increasing trend. So this is from the latest data. And again, as I mentioned, like we're going to focus on the children. So when you look at the children, for those who are already parents or who went through all that, you know what I mean by here, like less cognitive development, less processing power, especially they are impulsive and poor decision making. So like when you really are driving on the driveway and all that, we all know that we have to be careful, especially also like their physics, we all know that the smaller, harder for drivers to see. So when you look at the younger pedestrians, like those who are less than 14 years old, like they are the fatal crash, about 20% they are from when they're walking as pedestrian. So that's the fact. And there have been some studies. We all know virtual reality is a good way to do some testing, simulation. And one of the big reasons is because the risk is not right, the real risk, as well as there have been a lot of study with the eye trackers on the children that has proven, yes, their visual processing is quite different from the adults. So our research question was, okay, so they're small per age group. So basically what they see will be slightly different from what we see because we're adults. So is there any like impact of the different height that will also impact the decision of those children? And what do they look at it? Ultimately, what is the focal point? So those were the things that we were quite wondering. And what we did was like, okay, so let's set the objective. Let's look at the crossing behavior. Let's look at their gazing, as well as like what is the eye height of those children, and is it successful? Is it safe? Which I'm gonna explain a little bit later. And is there any relationship? Can we draw some relationship and see that ultimately, like it's not gonna be like policy can change like right away, but somehow we can kind of like input the data so that when we're designing the school zones or something like according to the land use, is there any feedback or like input that we can provide as informative decision making? So how could it be possible? So at Villanova, we have what we call CAVE. So it's like automatic virtual environment. So just think about like this room. You have all these dimensions, this floor, like these 3 walls. Like what you can do is that you can project the recorded data. Like if you record a video scene, or you can actually create your own scene, and you feel kind of immersed. So that's what we do a lot at Villanova, and especially here, like this is the PI who invented this, and then that's actually the Vatican like church. Like, so we offer the church view and all that. So this is like a 3D, like immersive setting. So this was the study site that we chose. It's a 2-lane, and then it's a intersection where you have 1 lane per direction, and then we do have a crossing, and that's where we're gonna look into it. And then how is it possible? So when you render that part into the cave system that we explained, this is how it looks like. I don't know if the resolution is okay, but basically what you see here is this is a wall that was projecting all the scenery and rendering like the intersection like setting. So the way how it is possible is because we have 360-degree camera that records everything, and we render in here. And the study setting was that the subject is standing and you're wearing the eye tracker. So what we're trying to do is, okay, you stand here, and then here's the video rolling over. Now, they cannot really walk through because, again, this is a wall. But then what we ask them to do is just pretend that you want to like cross, and then when you're actually crossing, give us some sign. Like either like you just say, hey, I'm going to cross, or like give us some clue so that we kind of mark it so that we know that, hey, this was the time frame, what were they looking at, and then there is a decision making. So that's how the setting was. And one thing I would like to say is because we had to put those people inside, it was not easy to actually bring those little kids in there because of the IRB and all that. So what we did was we wanted to name it as a pilot study. So how can we actually mimic the vision of the children? So what we did was we actually changed the height of this camera. So that's how we recorded. And the way how we did was, let's look at the 5 years, 7 year, 10, 12, and then above. And these were the heights that we adjusted according to the 50th percentile of the height. And also we wanted to take advantage of the tripod that we already had and then go to the lowest to the highest point. So we had a 7 height different recording the view. And that's what we rendered in the cave system. And again, it was not easy to recruit those little kids, so we said, let's do this pilot study. So we only had 5 different subjects. So we understand that that was the limit of the study, but at the same time, we really wanted to see what people are looking at, and then is there any height difference that was really impressing them for the changing their decision to cross or not. So what we did was, when we first brought the subject, we asked them questions like, what is your height? How do you think you are crossing? Do you think you're a safe pedestrian? Or do you look at the smartphone? So we kind of wanted to have some basic idea of what their habit is. And then we put them in the cave system. And then also, we were interested to know if the subject really experienced the immersed feeling, or do they feel like it was really hey, artificial? So we had to have some feedback about our VR system. So that's what we asked, and then we asked them, hey, you said that you're gonna look at it so and so. Do you really think that's what you did in the simulation? I mean, in the setting. So there were some data that we collected pre and post. And which object are you looking at it? That was one of the eye tracker that we collected data. They don't need to say, hey, I'm looking at now here and then I'm gonna cross. No, they don't need to say anything other than, hey, I think I'm gonna cross now. So in our team looked at it some of the objects, predefined objects that we did, hey, are they looking at the signal head here? Are they looking at the vehicles coming from your left side, or are you more interested in those who are crossing from the right side? So there were some predefined objects that we had in mind where the subjects were looking at. So that's how it was. We collected the data, and then we said that the safe crossing is basically when the red traffic light turns on for the vehicles on that direction, and until when we see the blinking sign, if people they cross within that time frame, we know that it is safe. What about unsuccessful crossing? So it's the safe crossing translated into the successful, whereas unsuccessful crossing is that still you cross it, but somehow when the vehicle enters, when it is the pedestrian crossing time, because we had the video, we kind of calculated the pedestrian walking the walking speed and the distance, and then we kind of compared the timestamp. So we kind of figured out, hey, they said that they're gonna cross, and then this is how many seconds has elapsed, and then if the video shows the vehicle coming in, then it's gonna be unsuccessful crossing. So we had some definition of those, and ultimately what we found out, which was not surprising, is that there is a high correlation between looking at the signal head and the successful as well as safer crossing. So again, I would like to say that per subject, they were in the cave system for about 40 minutes, and there were more than 30 cases when they can cross. So it was not ample data, but still we think that it is okay data to kind of see it. But at the same time, the thing was that the setting was in such that coloring was not as clear when they were blinking. So we're a little bit, we need to do some research on the like how to render the coloring, blinking more realistic. But like this is what our data is showing. And key observation is that like, okay, so what we want to do is that we talk a lot about driving simulator. We know that there is a lot of driving simulator. People look at it, they look at a driver's like behavior and all that. But our thinking was that what about pedestrian, especially the children? So we looked at like a cave system as a rendering venue to kind of like mimic the crossing road. And that's what we tried. And fortunately, there was really not height impacts. Like it wasn't really like different from like when we looked at it, the lowest like tripod setting and the rendering system versus for the same subject, like varying the height like of the view. It wasn't really changing their behavior. So there were like some correlation between gazing objects and then time. So pedestrian signal ahead was the one that they looked at the most before the crossing. So what are the things that we have to look at for the future research? Obviously, there were only 5 subjects, and they were all males, and then they were all about the same height, about like 5'7", 5'8". So I think as like the other studies, we really need to include diverse group, especially if we were interested in children, we really need to bring them in and then do it, and that's what we're working, so hopefully we can do that. And also we have to test the various scenarios, the traffic situation. When we recorded, it was around 10 a.m. until noontime, and it was not that heavy traffic. So like we know that our decision is also a factor of other inputs such as traffic situation. So we need to do that as well as roadway geometric design. Hey, if it were the crosswalk was really long versus like when it was short. So we understand that we have a lot to do, but at the same time, what we wanted to show here is like there is a way to do some pedestrian simulation. So if you're interested, just let me know. And this is something that we are trying to do with a children's hospital as well. So I know my presentation is very short, but if you have any questions, just let me know. And